Music out on the lawn. It's a little too hot to do that usually this time of year. So tonight you're going to be hearing from Joe Burgess. Joe has just published a book of photographs that he'll be talking to you about. They were taken in the 1940s and 50s in the Big Bend by his father. And next month our goal is we're going to have a ladies' tea. And it will be on a Saturday afternoon, and it's limited to 8 people. And so it will be the first 8 people that we have sign up, and it's going to be $20 a person. And they're going to sit at the original Moody dining table and be served tea. And so we have 3 reservations so far, so we've got 5 more spots for that. And then in October, we're going to resume something that we did some time ago, which was Tales of Taylor. We're going to bring some people back or in that have stories to tell about Taylor. Taylor's founding, Taylor's history, Taylor's notoriety, whatever. And so
Come in.
And then
How are you?
will be our veterans program.
Good to see you.
And December, once again, we will be the kickoff point for the Heritage Society's Christmas Tour of Homes. So we've got a full schedule between now and the end of the year. But for now, I'd like you to welcome Joe Burgess. And
Thank you, Susan. All right. As we are well aware, the lives of human beings are very temporary. In fact, in the big picture, the life of planet Earth is even temporary. So what are you and I doing with our brief moment in time? There are billions of planets out there, of course, but planet Earth just happens to be the coolest planet that we know of. And man has added to it cathedrals and castles, pyramids, great walls, museums. Some folks I know have used their moment in time to cruise the Gulf of Texas, or whatever that body of water down there is called today. Some have cruised Mediterranean ports of call, taken river trips throughout Europe, a train trip up the western United States. One local couple even floated up the Amazon. Why? An overloaded bucket list, I guess. That's the only reason I can think of. I don't know, Eloise. All I'm saying is look around you. You may not be able to or even want to climb Mount Everest or check out Machu Picchu in Peru. But have you even strolled the Riverwalk in San Antonio or visited our local caverns? Typically, we come to the Moody Museum to immerse ourselves in the rich history of Taylor and Williamson County. This evening, please join me in an adventure that takes place in far west Texas. Big Bend, through the lens of Glenn Burgess, is a small sample of the thousands of photos that Dad took in the 1940s and 50s. 395 of them in the book, to be exact, and his accompanying comments on the Big Bend region. It includes the region's rugged landscapes, the plant life from the lowly cactus to a stand of ponderosa pine, wildlife from snakes to mountain lion, area ranches, forts, a lot of intriguing stuff. Dad and I actually counted the ponderosa pine trees in the Big Bend National Park one time. About 90 of them, as I recall, and one huge Arizona cypress that we came across. I need to thank the Moody Museum Advisory Board for allowing me to make this presentation in this wonderful historic setting. Isn't this great? Don't we love it? I also need to thank Sul Ross State University in Alpine in the archives of the Big Bend. They were the ones that preserved Dad's photo collection. I spent a couple of weeks at Stellar Ross scanning the 4x5 negatives that he had picked out, and a couple of years matching those scenes to his edit. My brothers Jack and Don Burgess contributed details from their younger years. Both of them graduated from Alpine High School, and both worked summers in the national park while they were going to college. Unfortunately, my brother Don passed away before I was able to finalize this book. My brother Don spent his life in the Sierra Madre of northern Mexico, working with the Tarahumara Indians. He published a book on the construction of the Chihuahua Pacifico Railroad called Sierra Challenge, based on his own work experience and newspaper articles written by our father, Glenn Burgess. Those articles covered the construction of that railroad, that incredible railroad across the Sierra Madre of Mexico. My brother Jack, a mining engineer, managed mines throughout the United States and in Chile. He served as a consultant after retirement for projects in Africa, Latin America, and even Shafter, Texas, in the Big Bend country. He also served for a number of years on the board of the Chihuahuan Desert Research Institute and Nature Center in Fort Davis. He and his buddies built a mining heritage exhibit there that included an 1884 head frame and a ceramic donkey named Dinamito, Dynamite. There he is. RTS Connect here in Taylor helped with the initial layout of the book, and my niece Lisa Burgess Nordeau spent months editing and preparing the book for print. And of course, thank you, Nancy, for kicking my butt to keep me moving forward. The book was printed by Barnes & Noble and is on sale at Curio Morvosa here in Taylor. This is one of my favorite photographs of Dad reading Popular Photography magazine. An early day selfie, I suppose, which is quite a challenge with a 4x5 sheet film camera. I can tell that it was taken in his early 30s, since he still had a little bit of hair on his head. This is Dad with a 5x7 sheet film camera overlooking Alpine. Dad was in his late 80s when his knees would no longer carry him over the rugged trails to his favorite fishing holes. Dad loved to fish, and photography for newspaper articles had usually been his excuse to sneak away. He was obviously bored at that point in his life, and I convinced him to pick out a couple of hundred of his favorite Big Bend Park negatives and record a few comments about each. I told him to think in terms of publishing a book someday. My vision had been his scenic photos of the national park, and of course, the development of that park. When I later reviewed his work, he had chosen several hundred negatives that covered the Big Bend region as a whole, not just the park. As I got into it, I realized that the park is a magnificent piece of the puzzle, but certainly not the whole ball of wax. The rugged terrain doesn't stop at a line drawn in the sand, or even the river that surrounds the park on 3 different sides. This is a photograph of Cathedral Mountain, just south of Alpine, an example of the landscape outside the park boundaries. And of course, the plant and animal life certainly isn't confined to the park. It's a unique park, to be sure, but so is the surrounding region. Impressive mountains like Hen Egg, Cathedral, Twin Peaks, Miter Peak, Sawtooth, the Davis Mountains. These form the region outside the park. The communities of Alpine, Fort Davis, Marathon tell me that Marfa isn't unique with its mysterious lights. Alpine, a community of 6,000 with professional baseball, a university. And did you know that Sul Ross in 1945 was the birthplace of intercollegiate rodeo? And there's McDonald Observatory, Fort Davis National Historic Site, a Girl Scout camp, a Boy Scout camp. The list goes on. Despite the sparse population, or perhaps because of it, it's an incredible region. 25 years after Dad chose those images, I started feeling guilty about creating something with his work, and finally began organizing and his photos and his notes. I'm sure he's up there wondering what took me so dang long. So, and it took another 5 years of organizing and editing and prep work to achieve a finished product. Dad, I sure hope it meets your approval. This is Dad's 4x5 sheet film camera that he lugged all over the Big Bend region. I spent a lot of nights sweltering under a blanket helping Dad load the sheet film holders. You know, he had to carry a bunch of these because a holder only holds 2 negatives. And so when he made his trips across the rugged terrain out there, he had to have a bag full of these. But anyway, I would help him. I would be under a blanket at night because it had to be totally dark, wondering if I might be snuggling up to a scorpion or a rattlesnake. He bought this camera in 1948 for $216. I still have the original bill of sale, warranty, and manual for the camera. All the photos in the area entry were taken with this camera. My brothers and I and Mom were frequent models for his photos. Are we talking about studio models? Oh no. Climb a little higher on that giant dagger, Jack and Don. Move a little closer to the edge of that cliff, Joe. My knees shaking so badly I worried about causing a landslide. My brothers and I have a host of good memories in the Big Bend. In fact, I married one of my alpine memories 50 years after the fact. Nancy Phillips and I became reacquainted while accompanying our brothers to a high school reunion there in Alpine. Nancy claims that we actually went to a movie together in the 4th grade. Well, my mother made me go with her. It certainly wasn't my idea. So who was Glenn Burgess and what made him the right person to chronicle the emergence of a national park and a unique region of Texas in the 1940s and 50s? Born in Coleman, Texas in 1905, youngest of 6 children, his family moved by wagon to Lubbock in 1907, which at that time had a population of about 400. He received a bachelor's degree in business administration and minors in journalism and Spanish from the University of Texas, Austin in 1930. He worked his way through college, delivering newspapers on a motorcycle and as a member of the 124th Cavalry Unit in Mineral Wells. Cavalry Unit? Yes, back then the cavalry still rode horseback. After graduation, he worked for the Conoco Travel Bureau in Denver before returning to Texas to train in Chamber of Commerce management work. He held management positions in Center, Gonzales, Graham, Littlefield, Lufkin, and Alpine, all in Texas, of course, and Santa Fe, New Mexico, and St. Joseph, Missouri. Interestingly enough, he and Mom lived in Alpine on 3 different occasions. I mean, really? Who does that? 1941 to 45 as Chamber of Commerce manager, 1946 to 48 as the organizer and first manager of KVLF radio station, 1951 to 59 as a small business owner and college instructor. This gave Dad an 18-year span to chronicle the park and the region. And that happened to be, of course, the formative years of the Big Bend National Park. Quoting from an August 14th, 1944 letter written by Dad while he was serving as Alpine Chamber manager. He wrote this letter to Captain W.E. Lockhart, an Alpine doctor who was still serving in the Pacific War Theater. I believe the whole area will have a wonderful tourist business after the war. I believe, too, that a nice advertising campaign will attract many permanent residents to Alpine who want to settle down here because of the climate conditions. Later on, in 1951, Dad was serving as the manager of the St. Joseph, Missouri Chamber of Commerce and looking for an excuse to return to Texas. Well, that same Dr. W.E. Lockhart convinced Mom and Dad that Alpine indeed was about to boom. "Come on back," Dr. Lockhart said, "and help initiate the population explosion." The population was about 5,000 at that time, and today, yeah, it has jumped up to around 6,000. I guess that was the boom. But a town that small with a university and a pro baseball team is pretty unique in my mind. The elevation of 4,500 feet, of course, is pretty unique in Texas. A quick side note, when you visit Alpine, be sure to stop by the Museum of the Big Bend. Incredible displays of the area history. And last year, 2024, among small town area museums, the Museum of the Big Bend was elevated to the top spot in the whole nation by USA Today. In 2025, it still ranks among the top 10. A large gallery was added recently, displaying such works as that of El Paso artist Tom Lee. Dad was also a promoter, as you might expect from an early days chamber manager. Actually, you should still expect that from your chamber manager, Tia Stone. Dad organized and served on the board of the Gonzales Warm Springs Foundation for Crippled Children, for which he received a personal thank you note from President Roosevelt. He was involved with the construction of Possum Kingdom Dam in Graham, Texas. He and a forest ranger on snow skis laid out the road to what became the Santa Fe ski basin in New Mexico. He was involved with the transfer of land from the Catholic Church to the Baptist Church above Santa Fe for the Glorieta Baptist Encampment, now Glorieta Adventure Camps. In his final years in Safford, Arizona, he was honored by the Graham County Historical Society as the 1992 Pioneer of the Year. While in Alpine, he made several trips to Mexico City, promoting an international peace park that would include the land on the Mexican side of the river. Dad's photo of Mariscal Canyon highlights the rugged country on both sides of the border. Mexico didn't follow through at that time, but today, a joint effort between the Mexican government and CEMEX, one of the world's largest cement manufacturers, has created Latin America's first designated wilderness, the 495,000 acre Maderas del Carmen Flora and Fauna Protection Area. The whole region across from the national park and the Big Bend Ranch State Park is now protected by the Mexican government. This is Dad's 1938 photo of the Odessa Lions Club presenting a check to Sul Ross President Horace W. Morlock. The check was to help promote the park effort. Morlock was also president of the International Parks Association. Dad supplied promotional photos and articles not only to local newspapers like the Alpine Avalanche, but also feature stories for the El Paso Times, the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, the Dallas Morning News, and the San Angelo Standard-Times. Dad was always bragging about one article that made the Associated Press wire service nationwide. A soldier on leave rolled his Volkswagen trying to miss a rabbit near Alpine. The caption read, "Texas Jackrabbit flips car." Dad's background put him on the invitation list for any important event in the area or anything that needed to be recorded for historical purposes. He recorded the turning over of the Big Bend property deeds to the National Park Service. This photo records the deeds being turned over from Texas Governor Coke Stevenson on the left to the regional director of the National Park Service, M.R. Tillotson, at a ceremony at Sul Ross State College in Alpine. He photographed the building of roads to the park, the stringing of power and phone lines, horseback exploratory jaunts, visits with the villages on the Mexican side of the border, the addition of a school, a gas station, and visitor cottages in the park basin. For the region outside of the park, he served on the Alpine City Council that revived the town's water issues during that time. How I wish he was there to help me with our Central Texas water issues. This is the road into Fort Davis from Alpine, with Mitre Peak in the background. Dad worked with scientists at McDonald Observatory in Fort Davis, and in fact, he printed the first images gathered by the astronomers prior to receiving their own processing equipment. Dad photographed the old Fort Davis, while it was still in private ownership, now Fort Davis National Historic Park. And if there's time at the end, I'll tell you a story about this young lady. He belonged to a Highway 90 promotional group, the highway that parallels the border with Mexico, and he helped organize the Highway 51 Association. Now it's US 385, that stretches from the Big Bend National Park to the Black Hills of South Dakota. And during the Big War, that would be WW2, he served as a lieutenant colonel guarding the border with Mexico. Yes, even back then, the Guard was deployed to the border with Mexico. At one point, Dad taught a photography class at Sul Ross State College in Alpine, now Sul Ross State University. And some of his photography students often accompanied him to the park. On your next visit to the park, don't expect to see ladies in bathing suits posing in front of Santa Elena Canyon, holding a pole with a 50-pound catfish hanging from it. But you can find it all in the book. He claimed his favorite photo was looking down at the Mariscal Canyon. That's the middle canyon of the Big Bend, with a tiny horseback rider near the Rio Grande. I don't know if y'all can see that, but I had always assumed that he had caught some local villager passing through the area. No, it was actually my brother Don on a borrowed horse staging the shot. I have no idea how they were able to coordinate that photograph, but it absolutely captured the grandeur of the park's canyons. Dad also managed to squeeze onto boat trips through the canyons, Sul Ross exploratory trips into the Del Carmen Escarpment in Mexico, and somehow talked his way onto plane rides for aerial shots. He lost a couple of pairs of his glasses sticking his head out the window to get a better shot. He would tell me that some bear down there was probably wearing his glasses. The book doesn't go into a lot of written detail, but the photos are usually self-explanatory. Here's another shot of the power and phone lines being strung into the national park. And Park Superintendent Lon Garrison threw the first power switch at the park, which was followed, of course, by a Get Lit party. The first communications was by radio. And officials here are making the first phone call from the national park once the phone lines were completed. That, of course, led to a large area switchboard. So imagine when the park was created. It had to be explored, roads and trails were carefully planned and constructed. This is the construction of the window trail that goes from the basin to the desert, 1,200 feet below. Imagine operating this equipment that was very prone to rolling over. And what about water? Oddly enough, water had to be pumped from the desert below. That it had to be pumped up that same 1,200 feet back up to the basin of the Jesus Mountains for the visitor area. That in itself was no small feat. What about preserving old structures, which initially the Park Service wanted to tear all of them down, and relations with the villagers on the Mexican side of the Rio Grande? This is a park ranger talking to Mexican officials in Boquillas, Mexico. Oh yeah, there was Gilberto Luna, who lived inside the park boundaries with his herd of goats. When his sons took him to town to buy a car, he was asked where he was born. He scratched his head and replied, "Out behind a rock near the river, I guess." And what about documenting and protecting plants and wildlife supported by the varied ecosystems and mineral deposits and prehistoric remains? The park is truly a treasure trove, a huge treasure trove that had to be protected while simultaneously allowing access to the public. And a lot of researchers, I might add. And that requires personnel that had to be housed, vehicles that had to be fueled, and children that had to be schooled. This is Dr. Wright from Alpine giving polio shots to the school children in the park. The young folks on the right side and the left side of the teacher are the first graduates of the National Park School. So, how many of you have visited the park? Very good. Alpine, Fort Davis, or even Marfa. Lajitas, Terlingua. The Terlingua International Championship Chili Cook-Off. Now there's an experience. If you have a feel for the region. If not, shame on you. In the September 15th, 2024 issue of House Beautiful, the Big Bend National Park ranked number 10 in its list of the 35 most beautiful places in the United States that you need to visit ASAP. The Riverwalk in San Antonio ranked down the list at number 23. Well, author Megan Schuss may have been smoking something when she put together this list, but the Big Bend is absolutely an incredible park. Arriving from the east, the park can be entered from the village of Marathon. Heading south, you pass through a gap with Mexican persimmons growing wild, and a large forest of giant dagger cacti. There is also now an open-air museum in the park entrance, highlighting the amazing fossils and prehistoric ecosystems that have been discovered in the park. That in itself is worth the trip. Then you travel across a very arid wasteland before heading up to the Jesus Mountains Basin and Visitor Center. There you are surrounded by peaks and ridges reaching over 7,800 feet in elevation. Quite a dramatic change from the surrounding desert. The south side of these peaks drops off to the Big Bend of the Rio Grande. The river has carved its way through 3 distinct rugged canyons with walls rising almost vertically as much as 1,500 feet above the water. The return trip can be via Texas 118 to Alpine, passing through some interesting landscapes. Or you can take FM 170, following the river through Terlingua, Lajitas, and the Big Bend Ranch State Park, with stops at Barton Warnock Visitor Center and Fort Leaton State Historic Site, before arriving in Presidio and then traveling on north back up to Marfa. Warnock, by the way, was a Sul Ross professor who documented the flora for the majority of the Trans-Pecos region in Texas. This is another shot of FM 170 in the Big Bend Ranch State Park, but don't worry, it's all improved and paved now. In Lajitas, there's always an excuse for barbecue and a dance. The majority of the book focuses on the national park, so a few quick dates are in order. 1933, Texas Canyon State Park was established. September 1943, Texas turned over the property deeds to the federal government in a ceremony held at Sul Ross State College in Alpine. June 12, 1944, President Roosevelt signed the Congressional Act establishing the national park. News was overshadowed, however, by the Normandy invasion. November 21st, 1955, official dedication of the park finally took place in the park basin, delayed by the aftermath of World War II and the Korean War. And that's my mom up there, by the way, on the south rim of the national park, scared to death that the horse would bolt over the cliff. Exploring the park does have its challenges. That's our car in the middle of the Rio Grande. Dad was obviously on good terms with Mexican officials. That's the head Mexican border officer hooking a cable to the car. And I call this shot the official taxi of the NPS, the National Park Service. I love that photo. So what actually makes the Big Bend region so special? Nancy suggested that it's the mystique. Truly, it's awe-inspiring. You can feel it in your bones, in your soul. Imagine the giant creatures and plant life that call the area home during 130 million year geologic time period. Think in terms of the various geologic and ecologic zones represented in the region. And of course, picture the people from early Native Americans, Union and Confederate soldiers, early settlers, ranchers, railroaders, business people, to modern collegiate and sports enthusiasts, artists, and on and on. What an intriguing mix who have cared for and looked after a ruggedly beautiful and fragile environment. Yes, this book is also personal. Glenn Burgess is my dad, after all. My brothers are included in many of the photographs, and even my mom. But for you, the book provides a glimpse into the heart and soul of the region, the rugged beauty, the challenges, and the people who loved and cared for the area. Has it changed since the 1940s and 50s? Absolutely. The arts have become much more prominent, and the political pendulum, of course, continues to swing back and forth. But it all remains encased in the spirit of the explorer, the developer, the visionary that protected the region while also making it accessible to you and me. For the really incredible scenic vistas found in the Big Bend National Park are the Davis Mountains. A person can hike the numerous mountain trails, ride horseback through changing climatic zones, float by rubber raft down the Rio Grande, or you can sit in your easy chair at home and flip through Big Bend through the lens of Glenn Burgess. Now for the bad news. Beginning this fall, the Jesus Mountains basins will be closed for 2 years for a total rebuild of the lodge, restaurant, and visitor center and the water system. The $77 million work is being funded through the Great American Outdoors Act. There is, of course, considerable pushback to the total closure of the basin. Its related camping facilities and hiking trails, which will dramatically affect local economies. About 1,000 visitors per day visit the basin, after all, during the peak season. But there you have it. Of course, the park is comprised of over 800,000 acres. You can still visit the canyons, float the Rio Grande, photograph the Sky Island from the desert, enjoy the extremely dark night skies. There are some really cool cottages in the Terlingua area, and you can take in the 58th acclaimed original Terlingua International Championship Chili Cook-Off, October 29th through November 1st. And don't forget about visiting alpine art, antique, and rock shops, and the mountains of the Big Bend, and the Museum of the Big Bend. Tour the renovated old Fort Davis National Historic Site, and take in a McDonald Observatory Star Party. There are always lots of reasons for visiting the Big Bend region of Texas. Thank you.